Hole 1 is a 282-foot par 3 with a very intimidating tee shot. You can take this inside gap with a straight to understable backhand, or try and get a little bit more tricky on the left side with a straight to stable forehand. Both can be great options, but if not executed correctly, can lead to a very tricky par. Hole 2 is a par 3 that measures at 273 feet. The most common play you'll see is a straight to stable mid-range or fairway driver straight through this middle gap that hyzers towards the basket at the end. I personally like to take the right gap, throwing something a little bit more stable on hyzer, getting it to swing left towards the basket. Hole 3 is a very demanding par 3. Don't let the 360 feet of distance fool you, as with the uphill, it takes all of 400 feet to try and get the birdie too. The most common play you'll see is a straight to stable distance driver thrown backhand, getting it as far as you can up this hill and hyzering towards the basket at the end. If you prefer the forehand, I do see people throw a flex forehand that has the potential of flexing out towards the basket. The main thing you want to avoid is hitting a tree early, kicking left, and having a very tricky par save. Hole 4 is a par 3 measuring at 272 feet. There are two gaps on this fairway that you are trying to hit. You can either throw a straight to understable backhand up the middle, or go out wide left with a straight to overstable forehand, finishing towards the basket. The one thing you want to be very careful of is on the left side, there is a very big ravine that if you don't land the disc softly by the basket, you have the potential to roll into and have a very uphill putt. Hole 5 is a very fun, slightly downhill par 3 that measures at 228 feet. With the hill that wraps from the left to around the back of the basket, it's a very good hole to ace run without having very many consequences. Most players will choose to throw a straight to stable backhand with a putter out to the right and then just hyzer towards the basket at the end. I have seen players attempt to throw the forehand, but with the slope from left to right, once you get by the basket, it can be very tricky to land the disc soft to keep yourself with a birdie too. Hole 6 is a 212-foot par 3 that plays extremely downhill. The two most common plays I see are throwing a straight to stable forehand, aiming slightly down the hill and driving it into the base of the hill by the basket. The other play I see is throwing a backhand turnover with a more stable disc, throwing it on ante, getting it to fly over to the right, flexing out at the end of the flight to hyzer back towards the basket. Hole 7 is a very fun 401-foot par 3. With the decrease in elevation that the hole has, you want to utilize glide over speed when throwing a disc at this basket. The shape of the fairway really sets up well for a straight to understable mid-range or fairway driver, turning out of the gap to the right with a little bit of hyzer back at the end towards the basket. The other play I see a lot of is throwing a straight to a little bit more understable forehand, getting it to flip up out the gap and then hyzering towards the basket at the end. Hole 8 is a 395-foot par 3 that also plays significantly downhill. The most common play is going to be throwing a distance driver straight to hyzer, either right over these wooden boxes or just left of, pushing towards the tree line, but making sure you hyzer towards the basket at the end. You do want to be careful, as pushing too straight into this tree line can be very difficult to get out and save your par 3. Hole 9 is one of the more difficult holes on the course, measuring in at a 392-foot par 3. With how uphill the hole plays, you'll have to throw as far as possible to give yourself a chance for the birdie 2. Throwing whatever your maximum distance drive is, you want to try and get a nice S-curve out of the flight, putting yourself someplace over this berm to have a putt for birdie. If you don't have the distance, you want to make sure just to put yourself in the middle of the fairway, making it as easy as possible to throw your approach shot to take a par. Hole 10 is a 262-foot par 3 with a late gap off the tee. You'll want to throw as straight as possible with either a mid-range or fairway driver, hitting this last gap, landing somewhere in the middle of the hill, and trying to take a little anti-skip up towards the basket. Both the left and the right are very well guarded with trees, but I think the left is a little bit more friendly. Hole 11 is a very fun 348-foot par 3 with a little bit of increase in elevation. You'll want to throw a straight to overstable backhand with a distance driver, trying to hit this gap and then moving left towards the basket at the end. Although it doesn't look super uphill, the increase in elevation adds a lot of needed power to get up towards the basket for the birdie 2. Hole 12 is a par 3 that measures in at 328 feet. The two most common plays I see are throwing a forehand with something straight to overstable towards this left side that hyzers at the basket and down the hill. The other play I see is throwing a straight to understable mid-range or fairway driver to the left side of this telephone pole that drifts to the right towards the basket and down the hill. The one thing you really don't want to do is end up leaving yourself short and having a very tricky death approach down the hill. Hole 13 is personally my favorite hole in the course, measuring in at just under 370 feet. With the tight gap off the tee, the decrease in elevation, and the leftward finish of the hole, you want to utilize the disc's glide instead of the speed. The most common play is going to be throwing a straight to stable backhand with a mid or fairway driver, hitting the gap as best as you can and hyzering down to the left towards the basket. Hole 14 is a 324-foot par 3 and the first hole where we start our climb up the ski hills. You'll want to throw a straight to stable driver, getting it in the air to have time to move up the hill and left towards the basket. You'll want to be careful not to throw something too straight and end up in the woods to the right of the basket. You'll have a difficult time getting up and down to save your par. You also want to be very careful not to come up short and left, as that is danger as well. As we continue our climb to the top, hole 15 is a par 3 that measures in at 309 feet. This hole has a very similar shot shape to the previous. You want to throw a straight to overstable driver, flat out of the hand, hugging this left side to get left and up the hill enough. Like the previous hole, you don't want to go too straight as you won't have a chance for birdie, but you also don't want to leave it short left as the trees can be very thick. Hole 16 is the shortest hole on the course, measuring 180 feet. Although it is very short, it is no gimme birdie. The fairway follows the spine of this hill with drop-offs on both sides. You'll want to throw a backhand turnover or a forehand knifing hyzer, trying to give yourself a putt for the birdie 2. Now that you've reached the top of the mountain, you're rewarded with a beautiful view of Traverse City on hole 17. Measuring at just over 660 feet, this is our only par 4 on the course. As you can see, the hole is extremely downhill, measuring at over 100 feet of elevation decrease. There are many ways to throw this hole, from straight to stable forehand flexes, to backhand turnovers, to even thumbers and tomahawks just getting down the hill and staying in the fairway. The only thing you really don't want to do is saw something off early left, getting into the tree line, as it goes extremely downhill and can lose discs forever. Hole 18 is a 288-foot par 3 that is also extremely downhill. Coming up short is the absolute last thing you want to do, as you'll have a very dangerous approach or even a death putt. My advice is throwing something as straight as possible, trying to get past the basket to have a circle's edge or longer putt up the hill. The other thing you want to be careful of is hyzering left early, as if you get to the trees, they can be very unforgiving and can be very difficult to get up and down for your par.